And thanks so much for joining us. As promised, we wanted to get started at about 3 minutes past the hour, and here we are. So I am Emma Emmer. I'm Director of Strategic Programs here at Bentley University, and I am thrilled to welcome you to today's sample class. I'm joined here by two of my amazing colleagues, Roman Beck, who's the Slade Professor of Computer Information Systems, and Gordon Berridge, who supports our students through their admissions process. And so today, just to give you a little bit of a roadmap of our time together, we'll introduce a little bit about the Masters of Science in Finance program, just to root our sample class in where it sits here academically at the university. We then will hear from Roman, who is certainly more interesting than I am, so I will keep my part brief, and he will introduce you to his area of study. We'll take some questions on decentralized finance, and then we will move on to a conversation about admissions here at Bentley. If you have any questions as the program is moving forward, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll be keeping an eye on that. We'll certainly make sure to get to as many questions as we possibly can, both on Roman's presentation, but also on Bentley's admission process. Don't feel as though you have to wait for any specific point in the presentation to share your thinking. We would love to hear from you throughout, and we'll make sure to include some information there. Alrighty, well, let me tell you a little bit about our Masters of Science in Finance program, and then we will talk a little bit about Roman's class specifically. So while I could certainly sit and talk about our MSF for at least an hour, if not longer, I want to leave you with 4 things to think about in our program and listen for them a little bit or think about how they might interact with Roman's class. So the first is something that's very interesting about Bentley's Masters of Science program is I would argue it's a program where theory is really meeting practice. That shows up in a number of different ways throughout the program. So first and foremost, you're introduced to the core theory of finance, but throughout the program, there's extraordinary focus on rooting that theory in hands-on experiences. So many of our classes leverage our state-of-the-art trading room. You can participate in the Bentley Investment Group and actually invest part of our endowment. Most classes include significant project components where you're actually doing work. It also shows up in that our finance faculty is about 50% academics and 50% practitioners who then have came and taught. And so you see a lot of former CFOs, you see a lot of former money managers. As our program director for the MSF says, we have, folks on our team that are like learning baseball from former Red Sox players. These are people that have worked at some of the major financial institutions in the US who are coming and teaching not only the theory, but also teaching from cases that they have actually lived out. In one of our programs, I've watched our finance faculty actually teach a case study that he was the CFO for. And so he's bringing in his own learned experience and lived experience on top of kind of the theoretical knowledge. We all know this is what Roman's going to mostly be talking about today. Finance is evolving. Our world is evolving as new tools and technologies become available. And this program makes sure you are learning all of the key tools that finance professionals are using in their day-to-day work. So you're going to be using Bloomberg terminals and other kind of key technological tools. And you'll probably hear Roman talk about a lot of what we're teaching is preparing you for today, but also for the future, because we know this is going to continue to evolve. I also just want to point out Bentley is really focused on ensuring our students are moving into their professional careers seamlessly from our program. So you are able to tap into a plethora of resources and Bentley's industry connections. As I mentioned, right, our finance faculty, 50% of them come from finance and the rest are deeply industry aligned. A lot of our faculty are really facilitating connections for our students into the finance world. And then finally, a number of our programs are STEM designated. Those that are not are also still teaching technological skills to make you prepared for roles, whether in the United States or beyond, and really making sure you are at the cutting edge of kind of finance knowledge in order to be successful in your career. And so, as I said, I could spend another 45 minutes talking about that. But instead, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Roman to allow you to live a little bit of this program. So instead of talking about what you would learn in this program, I want you to be listening to this, not only from the perspective of really interesting information, but also learning a little bit of the how you learn here at Bentley. I will say, and Roman, I'm sure you can corroborate this, many of our courses, this is not the way you would learn. Never would you be an anonymous something and just a faculty member would be talking at you. That's actually very atypical here at Bentley. But given the number of people on the line, we have to structure in this way for this course. But it will give you a little bit of a sense of the faculty expertise in the way that we think about teaching coursework throughout our program. And so with that, Roman, I'd love to pass it on to you.
Thank you very much. And let me share my slide. If I can switch to right away, that should have worked. Yeah, thank you very much for giving me let's get this out of the way. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about what we are going to do in the course on Financial Technology 724 called Blockchain Application and Decentralized Finance. And obviously, there's plenty to say about that, and we only have a couple of minutes. So I will give you a brief overview of the themes and most importantly, why we believe it is very important to understand the shift that comes with the ability to create and capture value in decentralized networks. And that is a move away from centralized silo-style financial services systems toward an environment where people co-create value. And that goes along with changes in business models, revenue streams, but also kind of can be seen as the dawn of a new economy. Now, as I said, there's actually so much to say and so little time we have here today. So I will skip kind of introducing myself and why I'm here. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope you find this informative, what this course is all about. Now, as mentioned, we are seeing kind of innovation as a game changer all the time. And when we talk about innovation, we typically talk about information technology as that innovation game changer. Some years ago, Alan Greenspan said even kind of central banks can't lean against the wind of change, that wind of change being innovation, being technology. On the other side, kind of there's still some misunderstanding in the institutional change that comes along with technology, which Paul Krugman once said, unfortunately, he said, IT cannot change institutions. That is not right. Kind of we are seeing that technology is changing institutions all the time. And in that course, we will, of course, also talk about institutional logic, institution theory that goes beyond central bank as an institution, a commercial bank as an institution. We talk about institutional logics like settlement of payments, right? Kind of invoicing, billing. These are all institutional logics, and they are changing as we speak because of the abilities that come along with technology. Now, that is also reflected by the position, for example, of the US Fed over the last decade or so, where we have seen there was this sort of like resistance towards Bitcoin in the early days. Again, Alan Greenspan kind of understandably was not a fan of Bitcoin, and also not really kind of understanding the technology until recently. Michael Bowman kind of urged, I think this was in June, July this year, regulators to abandon their overly cautious mindset. So we are seeing a shift in what is perceived as a reliable kind of forward-looking way of running kind of commercial activities on decentralized rails. Now that comes along with kind of what do we understand as institutions? What do we understand as money? Kind of, and that is a lot based upon what Milton Friedman already said in 1991. Our own money, the money we have grown up with, appears real and rational to us, which only tells us how important unquestioned beliefs are in our monetary system, right? If we grew up on the island of Yap and we would have used these kind of millstones as money, they would have looked real to us and substantial. For us who have a different socialization, kind of this looks weird. And that is a way of looking at cryptocurrencies. You know, cryptocurrencies may look weird at first glance, but if you think about it, kind of what has been used as token of exchange over the centuries, from shells to rare metal, gold, to paper, to plastic, to electrons, to cryptographic representations, it's a natural progress of how we actually exchanging value in economies, in societies. Now that has dramatically changed with the emergence of the white paper of Satoshi Nakamoto. Nobody knows for sure who he is or if that is a collective of people. The white paper that has been published in 2008, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, which was put in public and in production in 2009 and is running ever since. And I guess kind of most people are familiar with Bitcoin. But with Bitcoin, you know, the idea was out of the box that value creation in decentralized networks is possible, going beyond just one cryptocurrency or one blockchain that is doing exactly one thing, and that is Bitcoin, towards different types of blockchains, different types of ledger technologies that allow you to actually program your business logic on these decentralized rails. And then we often talk about smart contracts. You are agreeing on certain kind of business logics, and then you codify them and put them on blockchain. And as it is activated only when predefined events occur, the transaction is autonomously operating on the back. And I'm emphasizing autonomous here because it's not just a different way of automatically processing transactions. It is actually giving agency to machines, right? Here, by the way, we're also seeing sort of like the confluence of AI, IoT, and blockchain, which are technologies, if combined, when you combine them, you know, you're creating semi or fully autonomous systems, giving rise to a completely new world of different applications. Now, obviously, sort of like the complexity or the completeness of a contract, as well as the nature of the service that is exchanged, the good, is defining in which area sort of blockchain solutions play its most important role. And that is kind of if something can be formulated in a very complete way and it's purely digital, then we are in the upper right-hand quadrant here. High blockchain relevance, digital, complete, NFT marketplaces. You could also put decentralized finance there. So the financial services industry is most affected by that technology because it is mostly something that is dealing with or takes place only in a digital space, which is why DeFi is such a hot topic. Now, I mentioned a few times decentralization, right? And if we are looking at kind of where we are coming from, if you will, from left to right, we are coming from traditional centralized applications where the front end, the back end, the software, the storage of data, all has been organized in a hierarchical way. Even if you outsource something to Amazon Cloud, it is still within your company. Then you can do something like partial decentralization if we are going from left to right. And on the right side, we are seeing something called fully decentralized application. That could be your decentralized application, but it could also be your decentralized autonomous organization that is kind of completely operating in a network. And that is a new phenomenon, and we are seeing more and more actually successful ways of organizing financial services through DAOs, right? Kind of, what is DeFi? You know, if you will, kind of, it's a censorship-resistant peer-to-peer decentralized service provisioning. That is something, it is lending, it is kind of borrowing from the underlying technology, permissionless public blockchain. And on top of that, it is auditable, immutable, and borderless, right? Which is, of course, kind of creating some regulatory questions, which we will also discuss in that course. But it makes it possible to organize services without banks, if you will, right? But increasingly also traditional industry, the financial services industry, is appropriating that technology for services. And most often these days you hear about stablecoins and how banks actually issuing stablecoins. So there's also a convergence of the fintech/DeFi industry together with the traditional financial services industry, both taking advantage of that technology in shaping, in modernizing kind of the financial rails, the way we are doing business in today and in the future. I brought the DeFi stack for today, kind of to give you a quick overview, also kind of that you are learning kind of the fundamentals of what makes a DeFi. DeFi, the settlement layer, already mentioned, this would be our blockchain that is registering activities. These days, we hear a lot about tokenization of real world assets, the asset layer that is on top, talking about fungible and non-fungible tokens. The protocol layer and the application layer, that is where actually our services, our smart contracts reside. And the most interesting part, at least for me, our decentralized applications, our DAOs, is the ability to aggregate different services provided by different entities within that DeFi stack. So you can actually aggregate your own kind of dashboard, if you will, of services in an unprecedented way, not possible with more traditional services. So you're seeing kind of, it is kind of changing the modularization of financial services in a completely new way. Now, in interest of time, I will kind of go through the different layers quickly, just to give you an idea kind of what we are talking about, and also the combination of looking into theories. As mentioned, I talked about institutional theory. We'll talk about principal agent theory, combined with actually going through examples where currently DeFi operations take place from providers of that so-called layer one, the blockchain on which DeFi is based upon, to the asset layer. And then we will look into kind of what kind of tokens are currently attractive and talked about in the market. The protocol layer, the core logic of DeFi, where you have your decentralized exchanges, where you have your lending and borrowing, where all the derivatives and synthetic products are provided, yield management, staking as a service. All these things will be discussed and are examples of the new features, the new services that are made possible through DeFi. The application layer, you have wallets, you have aggregators, you have so-called front end for protocols, Uniswap and the like. And last but not least, kind of something that I found personally very fascinating. On top of that is the aggregation layer, where you yet again have other players who help you kind of connecting the dots, if you will, developing your own kind of financial dashboard for different services like DEX aggregators, yield aggregators, portfolio and data dashboards, and so on, which is unlocking a new world for customers, but also is kind of providing and helping to organize a new liquidity pool where assets can be transacted and exchanged at an ultra high speed to leverage kind of opportunities in markets. What we are typically doing at the end, as this is sort of like a bit of a mock-up how I'm running my lectures, we have a discussion, an exercise session, and then we would interactively discuss what are DeFi business models, and in that case, kind of discussing how the replacement of traditional middlemen may look like and may work. Some time ago, Bill Gates said banking is important, banks aren't. Time will tell, we will see. I don't think that they will go away, quite the opposite. Kind of the financial services industry will innovate from the inside with the advent and the help of technology. But it is important to understand how you, with your capabilities from that education, can not only get a job, but you create your own job, because the job profiles are tremendously kind of changing as well. And being at the forefront, having the capabilities and deep knowledge about how blockchain, ledger technologies, cryptocurrencies are shaping the financial services industry, that will allow you to actually not only kind of get a job, but reinventing yourself again and again and again to stay competitive in the market. This is mostly what I wanted to talk about, and I'm happy to kind of answer your questions, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Roman. Well, while folks are writing their questions into the Q&A, I'd love to, if you don't mind, take one step back for the folks that are on the line. Help me understand what, you are a huge evangelist about why this content is really important for folks either moving into the finance field or for folks that are accelerating their careers in the finance field. Help us understand why we think having a fintech major or courses like this are really important for people that are moving into this field.
Yes, sure. So essentially, kind of, we are seeing something that is in the meanwhile kind of has gained momentum and speed, namely that certificates, stocks will be issued in a tokenized way. So the New York Stock Exchange just the other week kind of announced that stock market trading and issuing new stocks will be done in a tokenized way. So what that means, what that enables you to do, fractional ownership, so like trading in an unprecedented way, also allowing kind of customers or investors to invest into asset classes they typically were not able to invest into, right? Because we do not own a Picasso unless you have the money to spare. We do not own an old timer, we do not own a container ship. Kind of fractional ownership in a tokenized way kind of unlocks actually asset classes. It also allows you kind of at the same time as it is making these asset classes more liquid. The securitization of those asset classes allows kind of banks and other kind of financial services companies to meet regulation and compliance requirements in an easier way, meaning that you do not have to put as much money into the treasure chest to back up your positions. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is that kind of very similar to, let's say, e-commerce or fintech, these are terms that are increasingly less often are used because commerce is electronic.
Right.
Financial services is technology. We talk about DeFi now, decentralized finance, but it's only a question of time, when it is the standard fabric of the financial services industry, and understanding it now, kind of foreseeing the developments, being able to identify business opportunities is a huge competitive advantage. And that is what we're trying to convey to our students.
Yeah, Roman, I was speaking to one of our alums who works in decentralized finance. He worked at one of the major finance firms doing kind of helping them grow their kind of fintech practice early on, and then now has moved to another organization. And he made very much the same point as you, which is finance is technology now. And so, or they're, intimately connected. And so all of our graduates really need to understand this as the industry and shifts and changes.
As mentioned, indeed, the financial services industry is essentially a digital industry, right? Because they are not shipping any kind of products. They are not engaged in any kind of physical supply chain management, meaning kind of everything that can be digitized, everything that can be electronically verified, everything that comes down to know your customer, kind of liquidity of a customer, value at risk of, kind of counterparty credit risk, all these kind of information flows are electronic, and therefore the financial services industry is specifically susceptible to these kind of changes and developments. And DeFi, one of the questions I'm getting often is, kind of, isn't blockchain or cryptocurrencies not yet another technology, right? And of course, we have seen a lot of kind of technologies in the past where people say that is a game changer, right? Cloud computing, game changer, right? RFID, game changer in the supply chain industry. I think kind of we have to be careful with using that term because it loses its meaning.
Sure.
But if we are saying the internet was a game changer, I think most people would agree. A lot of people believe, when they are talking about the internet of value, right, kind of enforceability on the internet, that this is a big deal, kind of that I can identify myself, self-sovereign identity verification, without the need for any kind of central kind of entity that gives me credentials, is a game changer, right? And we are seeing kind of from people like Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who invented the World Wide Web, kind of all the way to governments, they are understanding now and talk openly about the need for having a more profound development and a deeper analysis of what this is to co-create that future. And I'm inviting everyone here, kind of participating in that course and taking that master at Bentley to not just prepare yourself for the current financial market, look ahead, right?
Yep.
Because how the future financial market in 5 to 10 years will look like is already kind of at the horizon. It's not guessworking. It's not kind of reading out of a crystal ball. Or so we are seeing already in which direction the market will move, and you should get ready for the future rather than for the current market.
Absolutely. And Roman, we have a question in the Q&A that I'll ask you in just a moment, but I do want to call out something that I think is really important that was just going through my head as Roman is speaking, and I didn't do a good job setting up. Roman is a faculty member in our Computer and Information Systems department. Obviously, many of the courses taught in our Masters of Finance are also taught by our finance faculty, or we also have folks teaching from our leadership, our management faculty, or other departments. And what I think is really unique to Bentley is we are a business university that includes arts and science faculty and business faculty, and they come together to look at issues from different angles. And what I love about how Roman is talking about this, and I hope others on the line can hear this, is he is bringing a computer information systems mindset to the finance space. And then you'll also have the opportunity to see vice versa. And all of this was particularly our fintech major was co-designed across a number of departments to allow for this kind of collaborative creation of helping our students think about the future. And I think it underlines a lot of what Roman is talking about. Roman, can I ask you this question in the Q&A, and then we'll talk a little bit about
Sure.
admissions, which is the attendee asks, basically, a digital currency, from their understanding, requires a large quantity of power to keep it running. And they have the question of, are we going to see a cap on how big this can grow by virtue of kind of power requirements? And then also are wondering if there's any other physical limits that might impact digital currency.
The question the question that is underlying that question is kind of is proof of work as a consensus mechanism viable, and will that be around for longer? Proof of work is the consensus mechanism used by Bitcoin. The proof that your servers worked hard is that you have to burn a lot of electricity to participate in validating transactions that go on the blockchain. Now, all the other blockchains kind of that are of relevance, they do not use proof of work, they use other consensus mechanisms. So one of the reasons why it is important to take my class is because that is a common misconception. Kind of people look a lot at, they learned about Bitcoin, they learned about electricity consumption of Bitcoin, and they immediately equate it with that must be the case for all other so-called distributed ledger technologies. That would be the proper term, DLT, distributed ledger technologies, where Bitcoin and blockchain, other kind of blockchains like Ethereum are an entity of, right? So But even for Bitcoin as the most important, most prominent, most often kind of referred to Bitcoin blockchain version to cryptocurrency, kind of there is a market and there is a future, right? Kind of there might be a cap indeed, kind of depending on which kind of calculations you are going to use. When the electricity price is so high that actually other use might be more favorable than mining for finding the nonce value to participate in the validation of the next block. So you're seeing kind of there's a lot of kind of stuff that needs to be clarified in a course first before we can discuss this. But kind of even for that, actually there is a reason to have it. And if you look a bit more into this, kind of we have an increasing number of green energy around and sometimes surplus energy. And we already have mining facilities in the States and elsewhere that only use surplus green electricity and thereby helping to stabilize the electricity grid. So as always, sort of like it is important to look a bit deeper into it and have a more nuanced view on that. It's not that easy, but electricity consumption will not be a problem because the majority of blockchains is not using proof of work as a consensus mechanism.
Thank you so much, Roman. Well, if you don't mind sticking around for a little bit longer in case any other Q&A comes through, we would love that. But for now, Gordon, I'd love for you to join us to talk a little bit about what it looks like to apply to our MSF.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you, Emma. And thank you, Roman. I really appreciate this quick opportunity here. And so I'll go through this fairly quickly. And so the application process is pretty straightforward. You do want to go onto our website. You can click on Apply Now, and it'll walk you through these steps. But the application process, it starts with your resume. We also like to take a look at your LinkedIn profile. And so you do want to make sure that you have both of those. And one of the things I always like to recommend to candidates as they are submitting their application, make sure that they are in sync. You want to make sure that the information that you have on your resume is the same on your LinkedIn profile. So you do want to make sure that you go through both of those. And it is required to have a LinkedIn profile as part of your application. The next thing we're going to take a look at is your recommendation. We do want to see one recommendation from somebody. We do prefer to see professional or academic. However, and you'll hear me say this a couple of times, if you're not quite sure which one to choose, please reach out to us. Me and my team, we're happy to talk with you about the application and clarify any questions that you may have about any one of these parts. The next thing we're going to take a look at is an essay. You will be able to choose a question on the application and answer that as your essay question. Please do note there is a minimum and maximum word count on this essay. It's a minimum of 300 words and a maximum of 500. Typically, we see about a page to a page and a half for each essay. We also do offer the opportunity for an optional personal statement. If you want to submit that, you can submit that as well as part of your application. The next thing is a GMAT or GRE assessment. That is optional. If you do not choose to submit a GMAT or GRE, that is fine. One of the big questions that we always get is, will that hinder our opportunity to be accepted or to earn scholarship? The answer is not necessarily. That is optional, and so that won't be held against you. However, it can be helpful, particularly if you feel like you have a weaker piece of your application. That can be something that'd be really helpful. Maybe you don't have a lot of work experience, or maybe your grades aren't quite as good as they would like them to be. That GMAT or GRE can be really beneficial. And again, as I said before, reach out to us. We'd be happy to speak with you a little bit about this and give you some advice on whether or not you should submit a GMAT or GRE. For my international students, you will that received their degrees in a foreign language, you will need to provide an English language test. We accept multiple different points of tests for this. We accept the IELTS, which you'll need to submit a score of 7 or better, the TOEFL at 100 or better, the Duolingo we also accept at 130 or better, and a Pearson at 61 or better. And then finally, we're also going to take a look at your transcripts. The transcripts, if they are, once again, received outside of the United States, even if it was in English, we will need them, those transcripts evaluated by a NACES member. The most popular one is WES, or World Education Services, or WES.org. And so we will need to get those evaluated from the education system where you receive that degree, translated or evaluated into the U.S. education system. There is also an interview for some of our programs as well, but again, reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk with you about which programs require the interview. Go on to the next slide. So here's our next big question we get, which is how do we finance your education? There are several different ways that students can finance their education. We do offer merit aid scholarships. They are available. As you see here, about 85% of our students do receive some level of merit aid scholarship. We call it merit aid because it's based on the overall quality of your application. So everything that I just went through earlier in the application, the higher quality your application, the more opportunity you have at earning an increased merit aid scholarship. The other thing I will encourage everyone to do is, and I'll go through this in just a minute, is the earlier you submit your application, the more opportunity you may have at scholarship, particularly in our early rounds 1 and rounds 2. We also do encourage students, if you are currently working, we do offer, you should find out if your company offers tuition reimbursement. It is varied by different companies, so you do want to reach out to your HR or your benefits department to see if you qualify for any type of tuition reimbursement through your organization. And then for those students that may qualify for grants and loans, those are also available here at Bentley as well. So go on to the next slide. So the application deadlines, as I mentioned before, the earlier you submit your application, the better chance you do have at earning a merit aid scholarship. So we are currently accepting applications for our spring term, which is starting in January. The priority deadline is coming up in just a few days on October 1st. The standard deadline is December 11th. So you want to make sure that you get your application in there. We are also accepting applications for our fall 2026 term. The fall 2026 term starts late August. Priority round 1 is also coming up just about a month on November 1st, with priority round 2 being December 14th. For my international students, I do want to point out that we do have a deadline for all international students who are seeking an F1 to come to the United States. That is June 1st of 2026. And then for our domestic and students that are already here but maybe looking to do a CVIS transfer as an international student, the deadline is August 1st. And again, all of these deadlines and requirements can once again be seen on our website, bentley.edu/graduate. In a moment, I'll put that in the chat so that you have that as well. And then finally, this is a great way to stay in touch with us. As I mentioned, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk with you and set up a consultation. You can follow us on social media, on Instagram or LinkedIn. For those students who maybe aren't quite ready to do a full dive into a full degree program, we also offer some fantastic executive and professional education courses. These are shorter term courses that can last anywhere from a week or so up to a couple of courses. And so you can go online and you can check out our different options that are available there by scanning that code. I'm happy to answer any questions, or I know Roman is still here, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any additional questions about his topic as well. So if you do, feel free. And again, if not, I will put our email and our contact information in the chat also. Thanks, Emma.
Gordon, I know folks often are curious about application fee waivers and good times to apply. Could you take one moment while folks are putting their questions in the chat to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We do offer application fee waivers. As a matter of fact, for those of you that are joining us here today, if you reach out to us and let us know that you're in today's session, we also do have your attendance here as well. We can offer you an application discount code or waiver. Those are also offered throughout the year. If you keep an eye on your email, we often send those out to let folks know. But I will also encourage students, again, the earlier you submit those applications, the better opportunity you have at applying for either for free or at an extremely discounted rate. And again, you can always reach out to us, and we're happy to talk with you a little bit about that and be able to provide you with any type of discounts or waivers as part of your application.
Great. Roman, I'd love to end with you. I'm curious, Roman, I'm going to out you a little bit as being relatively new to Bentley now. I'm curious if you can speak to what you see as unique about the Bentley community and why you think folks on the line should consider joining us here.
I think you mentioned something that is very important already also for me, kind of coming to Bentley as well, as kind of the students who may kind of consider if this is the right place to study. The interdisciplinary kind of cooperation here is outstanding. Kind of the ability kind of to work together with colleagues in information systems, in finance, in computer science, to collectively educate the students in finance is fantastic and is actually one of the unique selling points, I would say, which also makes it more interesting to me because from a research point of view, in order to have impact, you have to be able to convey the message. And what do I mean here is if you are kind of really good in researching the phenomenon I just talked about, blockchain and DeFi, but you can't really convey the message to students who are going to be the next leaders in the industry, you haven't done your job, right? And for me, this is a great opportunity here to exactly do that, having impact with, I dare to say, cutting edge insights and kind of knowledge from people who know what they are talking about. I also have co-founded 5 companies in DeFi, if you will, so like even though I'm mostly on the academic side of life. But that intersection between industry and academia across different disciplines is really something I'm appreciating here a lot. And I'm pretty sure students will feel it when they are on campus and get the idea why kind of that is a really kind of nicely blended way of educating and getting and receiving education.
Wonderful. Well, Roman, you said it better than I could say it. So I will just agree and underline what he is saying. I hope folks on the line will continue exploring our programs. Gordon has given you a number of ways to get in touch with us. We really want to support you as individuals through your consideration process, whether that means what track you want to start in, whether that means how you want to apply, when you want to apply, what have you. We are here to help you break that apart. So I do hope you'll be in touch. I hope you learned something interesting from Roman today. I certainly did. And with that, I will wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot.